Now we'll go over to Broadway, and we have New York Rangers left winger Ted Irvine. This has a bit of a water stain there. But other than that, it is a pretty decent card. All these cards are decent except for the Lemaire card. They're not mint by any condition, but they're good. Ted Irvine started his career with the Boston Bruins, played one game. Then he was in this Central Pro Hockey League where he won 2 championships with the Oklahoma City Blazers. Was with the LA Kings probably as an expansion pick. And then went to the Rangers and finally the Blues. 724 games, 154 goals, 331 points. 83 playoff games, 16 goals, 24 assists for 40 points. He went to a Stanley Cup final where they lost to the Boston Bruins in 72. Good second, third line guy. Doesn't say what his trades were either. Now we're going with center. New York Rangers, staying with the Rangers. Center, Walt Tkachuk, who now lives in London. He's actually born in Germany. Probably as an army kid. But came back to Canada. Spent his entire career with the New York Rangers. Went to one All-Star game in 1970. So 69-70 season. 945 games. 227 goals. 678 assists. A plus-minus of 184. So that's pretty damn good. In a 14-year career. In the playoffs, he had 93 games, 19 goals for 51 points. Still at a plus-minus of 15. He too went to that Stanley Cup final in 72 where they lost the Boston Bruins, and he was there in 78-79 when they lost to Montreal. Retired back in 1981. All right, go to the West Coast here. We have left winger Bob Berry. He actually got his start with the Canadian national team. Played 2 games for the Montreal Canadiens in 69, so while he didn't get a cup for that, he then went to the LA Kings. Doesn't say why, but he played the rest of his career with the LA Kings. 541 NHL games, 159 goals, 350 points. 26 playoff games, only 8 points. Kings could never really get far in the playoffs. Turned to coaching, became the LA Kings head coach in 78-79, and also became the coach of the Montreal Canadiens in 1981, until he was replaced in 84. With the Kings and Canadiens, he never could get out of the first round, lost in the first round for 5 straight years. Came back and coached the Pittsburgh Penguins from 84 to 87. Never made the playoffs there. And then spent 2 years in St. Louis, where he lost in round 2 and round 1 again. So could never get out of the first, could never really go far in the playoffs. Wasn't a bad coach, just wasn't the type of guy, especially in Montreal, that they needed. They didn't need a Bob Berry. They really needed someone like Scotty Bowman. Now we're going to the Pittsburgh Penguins. To center Sil Apps. He's wearing his New York Rangers jersey. He just got traded. He was drafted in the 4th round, 21st overall in the 64 amateur draft by the Rangers. Won a Central Hockey League with the Omaha Knights and then an AHL title with the Buffalo Bisons in the same year. So he helped Omaha win, then went over to the AHL and helped the Bisons win. Interesting. Only played 31 games with the Rangers before going to Pittsburgh. And then spent his final 3 years with the LA Kings. So he was traded from the Rangers with a player to be named later, Sheldon Kennegizier, to Pittsburgh Penguins for Glenn Sather. I would say Pittsburgh won that deal because Sather Sil Abs was a better player than Sather. Traded from Pittsburgh Penguins to Heartland Monahan to LA for Gene Carr, Dave Schultz, and future considerations. That's too bad. Sil Abs was 4-time. He scored 20 or more goals. With his biggest being 32 goals, 67 assists for 99 points. Probably played in the All-Star game. Pittsburgh Penguins in the mid-70s had an excellent offensive team. Just couldn't get it together in the playoffs. Only went past the first round once. All right. To the Motor City. Detroit Red Wings right winger Tom Webster. Card's in good shape again too. None of these cards except for Lemare are in bad shape. Webster was drafted in the round 4, 19th overall in the 66 amateur draft. Played 11 games for Boston, then got traded to Detroit. Played 83 games with them before going to the California Golden Seals for 7 games. And then he just jumped to the W. Played with the New England Whalers from 72 all the way up to 78. Won an Avco trophy in the 72-73 with New England. Came back in 79-80 to play 1 game with Red Wings. Not a great player, but he 102 NHL games, 33 goals for 75 points, which is pretty good. That was mostly with that 1 year in Detroit. Then one NHL playoff game. Back when he was with Boston. 352 WHA games. He had 220 goals, 205 assists for 425 points. 43 playoff games, 28 goals for 54 points. And as a coach, he coached the Rangers, but lost in round 1. He was a mid-season replacement. Coached the LA Kings for 3 years. Couldn't get out of they lost in round 2 twice and round 1 once. This is when Gretzky was there, so they replaced him with Barry Melrose after 92. And that was his, other than the OHL Windsor Spitfires, not much there. Now we have Toronto Maple Leafs center Dave Keon. Nice buzz cut on him. He's in the Hall of Fame. He won 4 Stanley Cups. 1960, 61 Calder Trophy. 2-time Lady Byng Trophy. 2-time All-Star. Conn Smythe in 66, 67, which is the last time Toronto won a Stanley Cup. And he's on the 100th anniversary team of the NHL. 8 All-Star games with Toronto. Won all his Stanley Cups with Toronto. Then after Toronto, he just got pissed off and went to the Minnesota Fighting Saints, Indianapolis Racers, back to the Saints, then New England Whalers, and came back to the NHL with Hartford and played 3 seasons there. 1,296 NHL games, 396 goals, 986 points, then another 301 WHA games. 92 NHL playoff games, 32 goals, 36 assists for 68 points. And then the WHA had 36 playoff games, 13 goals, 23 assists for 36 points. So again, great player. All right, we got our first goalie here. For the St. Louis Blues, goalie Ernie Wakely. He'd spent a lot of time in the minors. He played 1 game in 62-63 with Montreal, and then spent a lot of his career in the minors. Came back to Montreal in 68-69 and played 1 game before joining the St. Louis Blues in 1969-70. So he would have went to the Stanley Cup Final in 70 where they lost to Boston. Once Glenn Hall left St. Louis, finally retired, it was Wakely and Peter McDuffel. Neither one were very good. He jumped to the WHA in 72, played 3 years with Winnipeg Jets, 3 years with the San Diego Mariners, a year with the Stingers and Arrows, and also a final year with Birmingham Bulls. Played 113 NHL games. He was 41, 42, and 17 with a 2.78 goals against average, which was pretty good actually, and 8 shutouts. His best years were obviously with St. Louis. He was a 2.11 in 30 games with 4 shutouts. His WHA stats: 164 wins to 137 losses and 21 ties, with a 3.3 goals against average and 16 shutouts. So not bad in the WHA considering how high scoring it was. Could never win a cup, never won a cup or an Avco trophy. Ernie Wakely had been the property of the Chicago Blackhawks, but was claimed 65, claimed an interleague draft by Chicago Blackhawks from Cleveland Barons of the AHL, which means he wasn't the property of anyone. So Chicago picked him up, but didn't do anything with him. Montreal somehow got their hands on him, probably through free agency, as a free agent. And then in 1969, June, he was traded from Montreal Canadiens to St. Louis for Norm Baden and Bobby Schmatz. Bobby Schmatz never played for Montreal though. Neither Norm Baden, as far as I know. No, he didn't. So I'm going to give that I got to give St. Louis, but they probably traded those guys for other pieces, so who knows who won that deal. Montreal had so many good goaltenders back then. They had Gump Worsley, Charlie Hodge, Rogie Vachon, Phil Meyer. Then they got Kenny Dryden. So moving around, we're going with Boston Bruins right winger John McKenzie. John McKenzie won 2 Stanley Cups with the Boston Bruins, a big part of their success. Actually started his career with the Chicago Blackhawks back in '58. Played 32 games with them, then went to Detroit Red Wings for 2 years. Then back to Chicago for 2 years, then to the Rangers for a year, or half a year, and then the Boston Bruins picked him up in '66. And then he stayed with Boston and won 2 Stanley Cups. After the '72 Stanley Cup, he jumped to the WHA, bigger paycheck. Played for the Philadelphia Blazers, Vancouver Blazers, Minnesota Fighting Saints, Cincinnati Stingers, Minnesota Saints, New England Whalers, up until '79 when they folded. I have a couple of his WHA cards. He was also a one-time All-Star. So he was claimed in the interleague draft by Detroit from Chicago in '59. And then '65 traded from Chicago with Ray Cullen to New York Rangers for Dick Meisner, Tracy Pratt, Dave Richardson, and Mel Pearson. Say the Rangers won that, and then traded from the Rangers to Boston for Reg Fleming. Again, Boston won that trade, though Reg Fleming would eventually go to the W2. 691 NHL games, 206 goals, 474 points. 477 WHA games, 163 goals, 413 points. Played 69 playoff games in the NHL, 15 goals, 32 assists for 47 points. And then in 33 WHA games, 14 goals, 15 assists for 29 points. So a pretty good player for them. We're going with, back to Montreal. We got Montreal center, Pete Mahovlich. Big Pete. He's a 4-time Stanley Cup winner, won in '71, '73, '76, and '77. Actually was a Detroit Red Wings first round, second overall pick in the '63 draft. Played 3 seasons with Detroit, and then Montreal picked him up. And Detroit didn't play him enough. Couldn't crack the starting lineup, really. So Montreal picked him up, and then he just exploded. 3 straight 30-plus goal seasons. He had 5 of those playing with Montreal. Another 21-goal season in an injury-plagued season. Then he was traded to Pittsburgh. Played a season and a half there before going back to Detroit. And then kind of fading out of nothing. Twice he had 100 more points, with 117 being his most. He played on a line with Lafleur and Schutt. Often called the donut line because of the hole in the middle. I don't agree with that. Pete Mahovlich was a pretty good player. So in 1969, on June 6th, he was traded from Detroit Red Wings with Bart Crashley to Montreal Canadiens for Gary Monahan and Doug Piper. Detroit blew it. Mahovlich was a great player. Then he was traded from Montreal Canadiens in November 1977 with Peter Lee to Pittsburgh for Pierre LaRouche and Peter Marsh. LaRouche was a great player, smaller than Pete, but Montreal didn't misused LaRouche. Lucky Pierre. And he spent a lot of time in the doghouse. But LaRouche would score 50 goals in 79-80, along with Lafleur. And LaRouche would win 2 Stanley Cups with the Habs. So Montreal won that deal. There's probably more to it. Mahovlich was probably, I don't know what was wrong. But Montreal really missed Pete Mahovlich, so much so that that's why they drafted Doug Wickenheiser in 1980 draft. They needed a big center to play with Lafleur and Schutt, someone who could create space for them, open up holes, go on the corners. But unfortunately, Wickenheiser never worked out. Oh, we have Vancouver Canucks defenseman Gary Doak. Gary Doak started his career with the Detroit Red Wings, went to the Boston Bruins, where he played 4.5 seasons and won a Stanley Cup in 1970. Vancouver picked him up in the expansion draft, played a year and a half there before going to the New York Rangers, Then in 72, he went to back to the Detroit Red Wings, who sent him back to Boston, where he finished his career in 81. Steady, solid defenseman. Not a great defenseman. Like, obviously, Bobby Orr, Rick Smith, Carol Vodney, when they had him in Brad Park, were better. Yep, so he was claimed the expansion job by Vancouver, then traded from Vancouver with Jim Wist, the New York Rangers, for Ron Stewart, Wayne Connolly, and Dave Ballon. Because he didn't spend much time spent less than a year with the Rangers. I'd say Vancouver won that. Then traded for New York Rangers with Rick Newell to Detroit Red Wings for Joe Zanuzzi and a number 1 pick, which was Al Blanchard, who, again, Detroit won that deal, but then traded from Detroit Red Wings to Boston a year later for Garnet, Ace Bailey, and future considerations. So I'd say Boston won that deal. Wasn't a goal scorer, kind of stay-at-home guy. 789 NHL games, only in 130 points. But he won a cup, so I can't. Oh, back to Buffalo. We have Buffalo Sabres center Phil Goyette. He actually won 4 Stanley Cups with the Montreal Canadiens in his 50s. Played with Montreal till 63. Went to the New York Rangers. Then St. Louis Blues, Buffalo Sabres, and back to Rangers. 941 NHL games, 207 goals, 674 points, and then in 94 playoff games, he had 17 goals for 46 points. Wasn't a great player in Montreal, like a third-line guy or fourth-line guy, depending. And then when he got to the Rangers, he did better. So in 69, traded from New York Rangers to St. Louis Blues for Andre Dupont. Moose Dupont moved around a lot. I always thought he played for Philly, but he played for the Blues, played for the Rangers. Claimed an expansion draft by Buffalo from St. Louis, and then traded from Buffalo Sabres to New York Rangers for cash. So in 1970, he did play in the finals against Boston, where he had 3 goals and 11 assists for 14 points, which is pretty good. And the last one from Heroes from this set is Chicago Blackhawks goalie Tony Esposito. Paid $8 for this. It used to be $15. This card's not in the greatest shape either. He is, of course, the brother of Phil Esposito. He's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. He won the 1969-70 Calder Trophy, 5-time All-Star, 3 times Vezina winner, and a member of the anniversary team. Spent his entire career with Chicago. 886 games in 16 years, which is pretty damn good. From 1973 all the way up to 1981, he played in 60 or more games every year. So he's basically a Chicago backup goalie. He didn't play a lot until the end of his career. So 886 games, he was 423 wins, 306 losses, 152 ties. Had a 2.93 goals against average with 76 shutouts. And of course, Chicago wasn't exactly a great team by the end of the 80s. By the end of the 70s and early 80s. So his stats started to falter. But in 71-72, he played 48 games, went 31, 10, and 6, with a 1.77 goals against average and 9 shutouts. 69-70, his real rookie year. 63 games played, 38 wins, 17 losses, 8 ties, a 2.17 goals against average with 15 shutouts. He'd actually started his career with Montreal Canadiens. I thought he did. Played 13 games in Montreal, was 5-4-4. Would have won a Stanley Cup with them. 2 shutouts with a 2.75. So he would have got a ring anyway. He should have had his name on the cup that year. Let's go back and check. No, they didn't get a ring. Didn't get his name on the cup. That's kind of strange. He must have, because he played 5 playoff games. I'll go back and check. Doesn't say what they traded for him either. Oh, sorry. Then the playoffs, he never played for Montreal in the playoffs, though. Doesn't say what Montreal got for him, but in 99 playoff games, he was 45-53 with a 3.09 and 6 shutouts. He went to the Stanley Cup final twice. They lost both times to Montreal. But by the end of his career, he wasn't the main guy. Murray Bannerman had supplanted him by 82. Never missed the playoffs in his Except for 83-84 was his final year when he was 40 years old. Now the last card I got for this set, I got another card from the set. I went all the way to St. Jacobs. I was there on the weekend to go to a Filipino festival in Mississauga, but then on the way back we stopped in St. Jacobs Antique Market. And for $25 I got the Gordie Howe Mr. Hockey Special Edition card. This was Gordie Howe's last official card. He retired that year in September. So after 25 years, Gordie Howe announced his retirement on September 9th, 1971. So this is when this was played more seasons, more games, scored more goals, more assists, played in more All-Star games, won more Hart and Art Ross trophies than any other player in the history of the NHL until Wayne Gretzky appeared. So they gave him a special edition card. Jean Beliveau has one too. This card's in okay shape. It's got some soft corners. But other than that, it's not bad. So for a fitting final card from Gordie Howe and Jean Beliveau, who retired that year as well, around the same time, he has his own special card. Got a lot of cards, some All-Stars in there, Hall of Famers. So I only need 18 cards to finish this set now. And of course they're the expensive ones. I need Ken Dryden, Bobby Hull, Derek Sanderson, who's not so expensive. I would also say I need another Jacques Lemaire, but I already have him. Bobby Orr, Bobby Clark, Stan Mikita, Bernie Parent, Marcel Dion, Guy Lafleur, Daryl Siller. Those are the players I need. I also need 2 checklists, 2 trophy cards of Bobby Orr and Gilbert Parent. Bobby Orr first team, Jacques Plante second team, Bobby Hull second team. And then Jean Beliveau special retirement card. So those are all the expensive cards I'm going to need to find. I probably won't go mint condition on any of them. But there we have it. A lot of cards here. And getting close. So any hockey card fans out there, let me know who your favorite player of this era is. And leave comments in the comment section. Until next time, this has been Hockey Night in Belmont.